Hey everybody, Eric Switzer here for the Gamer, back with another episode of your favorite game, joined today by my two cadaverous co-hosts, Fiendish George Foster
Hello, hello.
and the very stakeable Stacey Henley.
Hello,
Oh my
hello.
god. I hated that. That's your worst one yet.
You love it. Exciting episode today. We're back from the holidays. There's a very spooky veneer over this episode as my state burns down. I am safe, other than the wind threatening to blow my house over. So let's get into our topic of discussion. Your favorite game with vampires. I love vampires so much, so much. Always have. Probably, I want to say it started with Buffy at an age that was way too young for Buffy, but
That's the best age to watch Buffy, I think.
yeah, yes. The younger you are, the better Buffy is.
Yeah.
Yeah, love Buffy a lot, but have been deep into vampire stuff since I was a kid. Did you guys see Nosferatu?
No, it only opened like at the start of the year for us. By the time this goes out, I think I will have seen it.
Okay.
Because we shoot these in midweek, but I'm going to see it on Friday, which is when this comes out. So people
Yeah.
listening, yes, I have seen it. People in the room with me, no, I haven't.
It's not animated, so I'm not.
And
I'm
George
not into
doesn't even like movies.
Yeah.
it. No.
Well, it's excellent. It's very Eggers. Everyone should see it. Everyone should see the original too.
I have seen the original. I can bet a lot of money that George has not.
No. I'm sure it's my favorite one.
Yeah.
Favorite vampire thing. Definitely.
Look, it's like an hour long and it's on YouTube. I think you should watch
That's
it.
too much for me. No,
It's
I'm
Have
very
a
not.
guess when it came out. Let's see. Guess the decade it
Oh,
came
right.
out in.
1940.
No.
No, not even close.
No?
That's-
When then?
Through the 20s. 1922, I think.
I am close then. Come on. 20 years.
It's quite a big gap for like how
2
old
decades.
Nosferatu
It's
is.
quite far off.
That's pretty close. I'm counting it.
Well, vampires have been in video games for more than 2 decades. You might
Yes.
say is a long time. Some of the earliest games were vampire games. I have so many to talk about. But first of all, quickly, what we did this for zombies as well. But what do you think the appeal of vampires is?
I think vampire a lot more so than zombies, and maybe more than any other type of creature. They're just very kind of sexy. I know what you mean. Sexy as in the ones in Twilight or whatever are hot, but they're always kind of done in this very, the leather, the sharp teeth. They have to suck your blood, which is very kind of sexual. So I think there's that kind of intimacy with vampires. They aren't monstrous in the way that a werewolf transforms into a beast or a zombie as this brainless, shambling thing. They're highly intelligent killing machines. I think it's probably the same kind of thing with vampires as those women who like write to Ted Bundy. That's basically what a vampire is.
Yes, it's like and this is a big theme of Nosferatu, but it's this like the forbidden exploration of sexuality. The taboo. I think that's definitely the source of it. Maybe not the biggest theme in video games, although I do have some examples. In video games, they're more like fodder. They're more like enemies with unique movement patterns.
Mine definitely fits the erotic leather theme, so we'll definitely get to that. Don't worry.
Nice.
Wow. I feel like I've gone so basic again. Like for me, the appeal of vampires is just kind of how distinguished they are, I guess, compared to other monsters. Like Stace kind of touched on that, but I don't really think of it in a sexual way. I guess maybe I'm really, really boring, but that's never struck me as a reason to like vampires much.
There's certainly a spectrum, and they've evolved in many different directions. And some of the best vampire games sort of explore all the different kinds. So we'll definitely talk about those. Okay, let's just jump in. George, why don't you start this week?
Yes.
Since you said yours is more basic.
Uh-huh.
George, what's your favorite game with vampires?
My favorite game with vampires is Infamous Festival of Blood.
God, I don't know that's a basic pick. It's just a terrible
come
pick.
on. No, come on.
Yeah, I knew it.
Yeah, I kind of figured it'd be obvious. I actually had a really tough time with this. I'm not the biggest vampire fan. Like, I really appreciate why people like them. I understand the appeal, and I always think they're cool when they show up. But I guess there's never been a defining vampire game for me. Like, I'm sure you two have. You have those games go like, oh yeah, I love vampires now. But for me, it's, you know, they're kind of like a cool side thing, I guess. And what cooler side thing is there than Infamous Festival of Blood? Am I right? So do you remember this one? Yeah.
Yeah.
For those that don't, so 2011, Infamous 2 came out, and then for Halloween they did a whole expansion called Festival of Blood, and it's like a non-canon side story, kind of like Undead Nightmare.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very similar to that. It just never got its flowers like Undead Nightmare does. And basically the gist of it is Cole gets turned into a vampire by someone called, I think, Bloody Mary. It's been a while since I played it, but that means you can fly around as a bat, you're sucking people's blood for power instead of doing the electric stuff. And interestingly, I think Eric will like this one, considering our previous discussions about Infamous, the karma system completely gone.
Right.
They're like, you can't be a good vampire. You can just suck people's blood, not even worry about it. And I've always thought,
trip,
like,
dog.
Yeah, don't even trip. Don't even worry, bro. Just suck people. Oh, that sounded way worse. That sounded way worse than I meant it to.
Well, now you're starting to get the vampire thing.
Yeah, I guess I just never realized it until this conversation. But yeah, I just, it was Infamous 2. We've talked about it before. I really like Infamous. I like all of them a lot. And it's always kind of bugged me that Festival of Blood exists, does this really cool, like, standoff thing like Undead Nightmare does. And it's just never talked about. Like, I know it's not to the same level. Undead Nightmare's, it kind of boggles the mind how much Rockstar did with that. But, I think Festival of Blood deserves a lot more attention, and maybe it would if PlayStation ever decided to release any of the Infamous games again, which they won't.
Well, they said they're going to be bringing stuff back. Maybe they will. Maybe we'll get a movie. PlayStation's thing these days.
Yeah, I love that. That's great.
It was a fun era where you could get a vampire spinoff in a series.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't feel... I guess, like, Elden Ring Night Rain is sort of in that tradition, but just this idea of, like, so much effort put into what is kind of a joke.
Yeah.
Like, expansion, but not even expansion, a full game,
Yeah, exactly. I said expansion. It's really not. Like, you didn't even need Infamous 2 to play it. Like, it was just like a standalone DLC. Yeah, it was super cool.
Get out of hell kind of thing, wasn't it? That was probably the last one I can think of where they had a game like that.
Yeah, I think it speaks to how games are made now, that you can't really do that anymore, because why would you?
Too expensive, too big, too risky. There's just a lot of things with scope.
So remind me, does he have, like, vampire powers in that one?
Yeah, so I believe the main one is sucking people's blood instead of, like, absorbing electricity. That's kind of how they twist that. Yeah. And I think you also have the ability to turn into, like, a swarm of bats. So,
Sick.
Infamous Second Son, you have the... neon. Like, you have the neon powers. You can run up buildings and stuff. It's kind of like that. Like, it works on, like, a track, I think. And then you have a stake as well instead of the amp. For, like, I think it was like $10, something like that. So they didn't go all out of it. Like, it's not like, oh my god, like, he's got a whole new moveset. He's totally brand new. But what they did was really cool. And I think Infamous is the last series I'd expect that for, because it takes itself quite seriously. And for Sucker Punch,
for some reason,
for some reason, almost to a bad degree, I guess. But Sucker Punch are known, like Sly Cooper, they're known for having some fun, and I think Festival of Blood did that really well.
Yeah, that was on my list too.
Yeah,
I wonder if you said there about, like, how me and Eric probably got more into vampire games, but actually, Eric obviously mentioned Buffy at the start of the show, and a lot of my examples of vampires that I really like, they aren't games. I mean, I've got a list of a lot of vampire games that I want to talk about today. But I wonder if the reason George just isn't as into vampires is because George isn't really into anything that isn't a video game. Like
I mean, yeah, it's true.
You don't really watch a lot of movies or a lot of TV or anything like that. You're just going to play a lot of. You've played more video games than I have, I think, because you're really into all that sort of stuff.
And yet, my choice is Infamous Festival of Blood.
Well, you've played the same game over and over again. Maybe what I should have said.
Yeah, I never, like I say, I never really got into vampires.
Definitely too young for Buffy.
I watched a bit of Buffy, more as like a relic of the past.
Reruns on Sky One.
Yeah, I fell asleep on the remote and Buffy came on. I was like, oh, give it a go.
Moving on, Stacey, what is your favorite game with vampires?
I've gone a little bit back into the past, although considering George doesn't think 20 years is a long time, maybe I haven't.
Right.
I have gone for BloodRayne 2, specifically the sequel. She's actually a Rain as a Dhampir rather than a vampire, but I actually think Cole is as well, so I assume we're cool with the distinction.
Yeah,
George looking blankly.
Yeah, they're all the same.
A Dhampir is a half human.
Yeah.
Is that what Blade is? Like the Daywalker thing?
Yeah. Blade is a Daywalker, which I guess is the same thing.
I think it is. BloodRayne, people who don't remember BloodRayne, really from that big era in the early noughties of massive action-packed spectacle games, kind of the original God of Wars, Devil May Cry, Bayonetta, all those sorts of things. It's basically just that, but she's also a vampire. I picked the second one just because I think there's a lot more blood in it. There's a lot of the battles I seem to remember taking place in quite empty spaces, like underground parking lots and that sort of thing. And as a result, there's like this big grey concrete landscape, and every time you kill someone, it like covers itself in blood. The original game was like set in. Now, I was going to say vampire times, as if these were creatures who've died off like dinosaurs, but it was set in like the Gothic era. Whereas 2 was set in the modern, what was then the modern day. I think it was set in the year 2000.
God.
So yeah, it does a really cool like interpretation of the vampire thing, because Rain has gone from one era to the other. We don't see that; it's just kind of a time jump. But she always feels a little bit out of place. She still dresses like the kind of Gothic Victorian era style. As with all those kind of games, the combos were always really cool. There was a lot more of them as well in the sequel. And yeah, I said at the start, I think one of the big appeals with vampires is the kind of the leather-clad red lace aesthetic. And movies are terrible, but I don't think you can really go beyond. There's 2 movies, 2 BloodRayne movies.
UV Bowl?
Both.
I didn't know that.
The second one, I haven't seen the second one. I'm saying it's terrible. I've only seen the first. But the second one has a 4% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Incredible.
Real stinker.
Don't know how you get that rating. I think that's like one person says it was not the worst movie ever, and 17 people say it was, and that counts as 4%.
Yeah. And then Uwe Boll challenged that person to a boxing match. I love BloodRayne.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of the quintessential like hyper violence, hyper sexuality of 90s games. How we went from like a rejection of video games are for kids, but just made video games for kids in a different way.
Yeah.
Right? Video games for young boys, basically. But
I hate that.
Yeah, I've always loved Blood. I mean, they put Rain in Playboy.
Yeah.
Right? Wasn't that a big thing?
Yeah, I mean, that was that era when that was happening, though. Like, I don't think Tomb Raider ever did that, or Lara Croft, but, Lara Croft was in advert, big thing in the UK, the Lucasade adverts, it's like a cultural touchstone.
Even I remember that.
And also, it was Laura Bailey's Brigade role, which is an interesting little fact about Rain.
That is
no, I didn't know that.
I think it was her first role, but it was her first lead. I am the main character.
I would suspect that's the reason BloodRayne has not stuck around.
Maybe.
It does feel very linked to the 90s and the vibe of 90s M-rated games,
But we have seen those things evolve, though, right? I mean, the biggest example of that era that I would say was Mortal Kombat. That was the big kind of satanic panic kind of game. I know there's maybe a bit more of the Satanism in Rain because vampires, but Mortal Kombat was the first kind of video games that are too violent. GTA. Mm-hmm. So these games can mature and grow. There obviously wasn't that appetite for Rain. I don't know if you could bring it back now. I think you have to have that evolution over time. I think if you brought Rain back
Yeah.
now, or BloodRayne back now, Rain would still need to be the person that she was back then. And how does that fit into today's game and landscape? Probably quite
Right.
poorly, given all of the discourse around Stellar Blade.
Have they done
Yeah.
like a remaster or anything? Like
They did recently.
Oh wow, I must have missed that.
I think it was one of those kind of, I guess, closer to a port than a remaster. It wasn't like the kind of the Crash Bandicoot Spyro Legacy of Kain, which is another game that we could have mentioned, has vampires in. That they did a big kind of, here's a reveal and we polished it up and all this kind of stuff. Even the Tomb Raider remasters where they made a big deal out of it, it was just kind of, yeah, you can buy it on the new consoles now.
Chucked on
and I
Steam
didn't,
for $5.
even though I'm discussing it here, I didn't bother, so...
Mortal Kombat at least has been made by the same studio and the same director.
Yeah.
They never stopped and they just kept making them. What do you know who made BloodRayne? Like, does that studio exist
I think
anymore?
it was a Konami game, just off the top of my head, but I will have a quick check.
Yeah, I have no idea.
For some reason, it might be because we've been talking about Lara Croft, but I keep thinking Crystal Dynamics. I don't think it is at all, but that's what jumps to mind.
I was assuming that it was a studio that no longer exists.
Terminal Reality Big Boat Interactive made it.
Okay. Well, that would probably explain it.
Yeah.
Whatever that is. Yeah.
They're still going.
Oh, fascinating.
Oh, they got shut. No, I'm just reading up on this now. So some trivia. They got shut down in 2013, but then they reopened in 2020 specifically to remake BloodRayne, and then shut down again.
And then shut down again.
Yeah. Okay. That's why BloodRayne's not around anymore.
Vampires keep rising and dying, I guess. It's very thematic.
BloodRayne could get a reinvention. I'm not writing BloodRayne off for sure. It could get like a Ninja Gaiden style Metroidvania reinvention or something like that.
The most recent game was a side scroller in 2011 called BloodRayne Betrayal.
I don't remember that at all.
Yeah,
it was given an enhanced version in 2021, which I also don't remember, called Fresh Bites.
Oh, okay. Maybe BloodRayne deserves.
I've never heard of this game.
No, never heard of it. Wild. And I think that as we get into more of these vampire games, we can definitely see the influence of BloodRayne.
Yes, there's a couple of mine that I think are BloodRayne-y.
Yeah. Good pick. Not the world's best games, but a very important video game character, I think.
Yes, I would agree. But what is your favorite game with vampires, Eric?
Well, we all had pretty obvious picks this week. I think mine might be the most obvious. My favorite game with vampires is Darkwatch.
That is not what I was expecting you to say.
No, I wasn't either.
Wow. Okay. Well, first mention of Darkwatch on this show, I think. Yeah. Surprised it took me this long to get to it.
It's an Eric game as opposed to this is the vampire game.
Yeah. This is a very special game to me. I got to do a very special oral history of Darkwatch for the gamer with its 4 co-creators a couple of years ago. So I consider myself an expert on the history of this game. Darkwatch was a PlayStation 2 vampire cowboy first-person shooter that I have learned through the process of writing that article was not in Europe, just like did not take off in Europe.
I've never heard of this.
Well, you should have heard of it because I wrote a whole thing about it.
Years ago, yeah.
Darkwatch was developed by High Moon Studios, and that studio has a really interesting history, but it is now one of Activision's Call of Duty studios. So it's still
being
around.
Staked through the heart and reborn as something dark and evil.
Sucked of its blood.
Yeah. But what's the word? Ever living forever, much like a vampire.
Eternal.
Anyway, eternal. Thank you. Darkwatch was going to be its big flagship game, potentially a Halo competitor for the PlayStation. It was going to have an online focus, and though it didn't turn out that way, it is a very interesting first-person shooter that does a lot of really cool things. It has like a retro-futuristic Gothic setting that it's got a cool mix of like almost like a Wild Wild West, but with like a Gothic tilt. So it's got a lot of like cool technology and vehicles, and all the weapons are enhanced with holy magic and cool tech. It's got a morality system, which George loves very much.
Woo!
You can be a good vampire or a bad vampire, and your powers change depending on which path you take.
I do like morality where that happens, I must say, where you actually things physically happen differently. I like.
Yes.
Very infamous.
Yeah, it does that well. The hero is a train robber turned vampire secret order super cop called Jericho Cross.
It's a very cool name.
This game does not exist. I refuse to believe it.
I can't believe you've not heard of this.
No, I've never. Like, I might have. If I looked it up now and I saw a picture, I might go.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's the article Eric wrote. I read in depth at the time and internalized.
Eric Switzer.
It was published by Capcom in North America and published by Ubisoft in Europe, which is weird. We don't really see that kind of thing anymore.
really major studios as well, not just like little satellites of each other.
Oh, I have seen this. Yeah, sorry, I had to look as soon as I said it.
I wrote a whole article about it.
And there's Eric's piece. Yep, I see it. Okay, that's on my to read later list, but go on.
Just a really iconic blend of Western horror and steampunk that it takes all of that and makes it so distinctly Darkwatch. And I love it. Evil West.
Yes, that's what I was going to mention. Yeah, really reminiscent of Evil West.
Definitely
Evil West reminiscent of it.
Spiritual successor to Darkwatch. Very, very similar. Yep, it had couch co-op where you are both Jericho. This is a funny thing from that era.
That was kind of basically. I can't remember how Halo works. You mentioned that. Were you both?
You're both Master Chief
in that. You're both John Halo.
Yeah, John Halo.
Yeah, same idea. And it also stole Halo's like armor system where you have a shield and it gets destroyed and then you die, but then the shield recovers over time.
Is it a holy shield? Is that the thing?
No, it's just vampire
shield. Okay.
Powers.
A million games stole that, in fairness. My Mass Effect stole that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The Xbox version had multiplayer, but not the PlayStation version.
The game that was designed for PlayStation didn't have multiplayer on the PlayStation.
Correct. But the PlayStation version had 2 extra levels that the Xbox one didn't. Great game. Jennifer Hale.
Another classic voice actress.
Jennifer Hale is Cassidy, so Darkwatch is like the monster hunters of this universe. They're like this ancient order of monster hunters. And so Jennifer Hale is like your partner. And then, so she represents the good choices. And then there's a very sexy vampire named Tala who represents the bad choices, voiced by Rose McGowan.
Oh, another throwback.
Yeah. And both of those characters, we were just talking about BloodRayne and Playboy. I'm pretty sure these characters were in Playboy too as a promotion before the game came out. And they did.
What a weird time.
It was a really
very
weird
time.
Weird time. There was the time when there was like, if you've broken your wrist from pleasuring yourself too much, buy a Game Boy. It was that era of advertising.
Yeah. I could go on forever with like fun facts from this game, but it's just so cool. It's just such a icon of my childhood. Me and my brother played through this game over and over and over and over, and it's not one that a lot of people remember.
Yeah, they did do Playboy, by the way. I've just looked it up.
Yeah. I couldn't remember if it was like Maxim or Playboy, but yeah. I love Darkwatch so much. I'll talk about it anytime with anyone, anywhere. I can't believe I never brought it up before on this show, but
Is
it's
it
fun.
is it on Steam or anything? Or is it locked? No? Great.
It is nowhere. It is nowhere. It is on PS2.
Goddamn.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they got bought out by Activision before the game came out. So when the game came out, it was just like, well, you're done with Darkwatch.
Yeah.
Like, that's not our game, like that's your game. So, but they did some cool stuff after that. They did some of the really good Transformers games. They did War for Cybertron.
That was sick. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Before they became a Call of Duty supporter. But yeah, cool game. Love Darkwatch. Okay. I have so many more to talk about. So many more. Where should we even begin? I guess let's start with the obvious ones, right? We got to talk about Castlevania.
Yes, which is the one I thought you were going to say.
Yeah, well, Castlevania has a vampire named Dracula.
Yes.
But it's not really... There's not that much vampire stuff going on in it.
It's very like... I think there's a lot of vampire stuff going on because there's the moon and the castle and the gothic. You're right. There's not a lot of vampires in it. The whole candelabras and the crosses. It's very designed to be vampires. Similar to I want to do more Castlevania, but also there's not really a vampire in Vampire Survivors.
That's what stopped me from
choosing that. There are no
that.
Vampires in Vampire Survivors. Yeah,
pointedly none. That's on my list, but it's like that's kind of the joke that there isn't, but it is so vampire themed that it's like it totally could have counted and maybe would have made a better pick than Infamous Festival of Blood.
No, I think there's vampire imagery is so strong that when you said there's not really any vampires in Castlevania, I was like, yes, there is, and actually no, yeah, there's not.
No,
there's not really.
Lots of monsters, lots of ghouls.
Yes. But yeah, I mean, Castlevania, we talked about, BloodRayne being an iconic game and, building towards stuff. And Castlevania is one of the definitive building blocks of games. It's just,
Absolutely.
Metroidvanias exist because of Castlevania and Metroid. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite Castlevania?
Very, very, very boringly, it's Symphony of the Night. But I'm not an expert.
Mine is as well. Yeah.
I haven't played them all. No, you would know more than me because I know you're a big Metroidvania guy.
Yeah, I love the DS ones. They came out with a collection of them last year for the Switch. That was excellent. Order of Ecclesia, probably my favorite one.
Not playing the DS ones. I played one for the Game Boy Color, I want to say, or Game Boy Advance.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, there were so many of them.
I quite like the Lords of Shadow God of War one. I know that's controversial, but they were fun.
No, a lot of people like those, yeah. And that's pretty much the end of Castlevania.
That is, yeah.
Yeah.
Come on, Konami, pick it up.
Yeah.
It's a Netflix series now. That's its big thing. It's just...
a pretty good one, though, mind.
There's two, isn't there? They did a second one. Like, not a second season, like a completely separate show.
Yep, and season 2 comes out this month.
Nice.
Love Castlevania. And then... the whole Vampire Masquerade universe of games.
Of course.
Which we need to talk about.
So we've talked about Bloodlines previously on the show. I can't remember what the subject was, but we definitely talked about Bloodlines before. It was... I talked about the haunted house.
Yes.
Yep.
I love Bloodlines. Famously flopped game that came out against Half-Life.
The Titanfall 2 of its era.
Yes. Came out against Half-Life and was like an unfinished, unpolished mess of a game that didn't really come together until modders took it over in the last 10, 15 years.
The No Man's Sky of its era.
Yeah, that game didn't get finished until 10, 15 years later. So, but just like an incredible immersive sim, really cool RPG that lets you explore all the different types of vampires. It's got the Nosferatu that can have to travel by sewer and eat rats because they're so horrific. And it's got the high society, and it's got the
masquerade.
The Buffy style of like street gangs, and it does all the different vampires. It's very deep. into vampire lore, and I love it.
I think that speaks to its origins in tabletop. It's the same reason Baldur's Gate's got so much going on, because the work's done for you, because the main game's still very, very hard, but there's so much there established within the world that you can just kind of pick and choose from that I think helps all of the BTM games. Maybe not Bloodhunt.
Yeah.
That wasn't great.
I liked Bloodhunt. That was dealt a bad hand. That was it had some for a battle royale. It had some cool mechanics. I don't really think it fits the universe, but
I didn't like the fact that you had vampires who are running around with shotguns and axes. It was silly.
No surprise it probably didn't last long. I think it's still going now, actually. I think they shut down development, but it's still kind of going. But mechanically to play, it had some cool twists on the formula. I just don't think it should have been a Vampire the Masquerade game.
Yeah.
No, it shouldn't have been.
So Bloodlines was actually the second Masquerade RPG. There was also, Redemption? And then that went away. They've been doing visual novels, like so many, like 3 a year for the past 3 or 4 years. There's so many visual novels. And then Bloodlines 2, maybe.
Swan Song was pretty recent. Is that the VR one?
Oh, yeah.
Swan Song wasn't VR.
It was third person, right?
A detective. No, it was first person. Swan Song was like the detective adventure game. There was a VR one.
Yeah, I've played it.
Last year that I can't remember the name of. Was it good? Did you like it?
It was really, really loyal to it. Was called Justice, by the way.
Justice.
It was really, really loyal to some of the ideas in Bloodlines with the ImSim stuff and the stealth. I felt it was pretty poorly suited to VR. I know we've discussed before, I don't know if we've mentioned it on the show, but how well Batman translates to VR, because it's so action-packed and it's so tactile. I felt some of the things you had to do in Justice was very fiddly for what should be a very physical experience. I remember when you reviewed Resident Evil 4, before they remade it, when they just did a VR version prior to doing it, and you said like the way they revolutionized the menus was really clever for a VR experience. Justice doesn't do that, basically. It's still just a lot of menus and radial dials and kind of look at your wrist and then flick the switch this way and then make sure to push the circle button even though you can't see it because there's no pass-through when the game's going on. And just a lot of fiddly stuff like that I didn't enjoy. Especially coming off games like Power Wash Simulator where you're just going to point. But people probably got something out of it. I think I would be more willing to hear the case for that than I would be for Bloodhunt. Is how I feel.
Well,
fair enough.
Well, okay, so Bloodhunt, I also didn't love, but it is linked to a vampire game I do love a lot, which is, okay, this is sort of a weird lineage. And this is another great example of a weird bygone era of video games. So I want to talk about 2 games, Vampire Slayer and Underworld Bloodline. So Vampire Slayer is a Half-Life mod. And it used the Buffy theme as its theme, which I always thought was funny. But it's a vampire versus humans mod of Half-Life's Deathmatch. And the vampires can climb up buildings and they have their own weapons, and then the humans have shotguns, and you just have like a deathmatch, humans versus vampires. A classic Half-Life mod that I played a lot. They did a remake of it. Not they, somebody released a remake of it a couple years ago that was pretty much just the same game in Unreal Engine.
Well, if the pros can do it, then, you know.
Yeah. It's hard to believe this happened because this would never happen today. So for Underworld, which was the vampire versus werewolf, Kate Beckinsale, I want to say 2000.
Yeah. She was Celine.
2003 or 4 maybe. So for Underworld, Universal, I believe it was Universal, commissioned a Half-Life mod team to make an Underworld multiplayer game as a promotion. And so they got in touch with the team that made They Hunger. They Hunger is a very famous horror Half-Life mod. And this team did a bunch of promotional Half-Life mods around this time. But their most famous one is Underworld Bloodline, which was inspired by Vampire Slayer, and it's vampires versus werewolves. And it was incredible. It was such a cool game. It's a multiplayer vampires versus werewolves. They have completely different play styles and abilities and weapon sets. And the game modes were really unique. They were sort of this blend of like a hostage capture the flag thing where, the movie is about hybrids. It's about half werewolf, half vampire, and how each faction wants control because they're like the ultimate life form. And in Bloodline, you're competing for control of a hybrid NPC. So like there's some maps where you both have hybrids and you're trying to steal the other teams. There's some where there's one hybrid and it's whoever can get them back to their side. But they put out 4 maps for it. It was like a really polished mod, like just a full game that was just there to promote the release of Underworld.
I have never heard of that. Yeah, that is weird. How
crazy is that? Yeah.
I guess the equivalent of that now is Roblox games.
I was just going to say these days it would be a metaverse inside Roblox.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
How far we've fallen.
I know. The problem with games becoming more part of pop culture, they become a little bit less cool. They become less like vampires.
Less cool, for sure. I remember
less sexy.
One of the new Spider-Man movies, they did a VR Spider-Man on the Quest that was just unplayable, just absolute trash.
Which is strange because VR Spider-Man just seems like the perfect combination.
It's just the ugliest, emptiest set of blocks that are supposed to be a city, and you can swing around, and that's it.
Facebook worlds.
It's just nothing going on.
Did you ever play Chaos Bleeds?
Yes, the Buffy
game, yeah.
The second Buffy game.
That era. I didn't play the first one. That era of like the Lost game.
Yeah.
Terrible TV tie-ins.
Great. Well, so much better than the first one. So Chaos Bleeds was the second one. And I definitely have fond memories of that game. But I
can't believe they made 2.
Yeah.
There's probably more. There's probably more like smaller, like the BloodRayne First Bites or whatever. But yeah, 2 like proper games.
There's a Game Boy one, so I think there's 3.
I didn't have that. I didn't have the first one either. I've only played Chaos.
Used to be I played a lot of TV show video games. I think there's like 15 Powder Puff Girl games on the Game Boy Color. I played all those. I played the Lost game.
I love.
There's an episode of your favorite game.
By Adamus, yeah.
Futurama game. That was a good one.
Futurama game was great.
Yeah. No vampires, though. Unfortunately.
A lot of Simpsons
all right,
games.
That's its own episode. We're ruining it.
Yeah.
We're ruining a future episode right now. Let's get back to vampires. Shout out to Kingdom Hearts, George.
For Halloween Town?
Vampire Sora.
yeah, that came into my mind, but I was like, I can't keep doing this to myself. And I've already mentioned
you
Halloween
did
Town.
from this too. You kept doing it anyway.
Yeah, you did.
This is a better pick.
Does anyone remember the family from Fallout 3?
No, I'm not a Fallout expert.
Cool little like all cool things in Fallout, just something you stumble upon that turns out to be this really fascinating little story in a random house out in the wasteland. Basically, the family is just a family of cannibals, but rather than accept their cannibal nature, they have adopted the aesthetic of vampires and consider themselves vampires.
Well, that's a cooler twist than what I was expecting it to be. I like that.
That's dark.
Yeah, dark. And like everything in Fallout is kind of played for a laugh, and this is, but it is quite creepy.
Yeah. And then of course in Skyrim you can. I think there's a Skyrim DLC where you could turn into a vampire, right? Like that was the whole thing.
Yeah, Elder Scrolls has been vampires have been part of Elder Scrolls in all of them. Yeah, but I think there are vampires in base Skyrim, but you can't become one until that one
DLC. I can't even remember what it's called, but I remember it being a big thing. So Bethesda loves its vampires.
Yeah. Bloodborne. So they're never.
I'm gonna say that
no one has ever named a vampire.
They're just blood everywhere.
But they all drink blood.
Yeah, it's like an order of priests, isn't it? Do they do it like it's holy water, or do they do it like it's life sustaining? And I know it is blood. What I'm saying is, do they drink it as if it's holy water, as a ceremonial thing, or do they drink it because they need it to live? I'm not an expert on Bloodborne.
Yeah, it's your flask. It heals you.
Oh, of course. Yeah. You're right. No.
Yeah.
I'm enough of an expert to have healed in the game because I hit a lot.
Yeah, like splashing monster blood on your wounds heals you.
Yeah.
So
I've never realized
no one ever says you're a vampire, but you are. You are a vampire for sure.
Damn.
It's perpetual night.
Yes.
You know.
It's more obvious.
Very gothic.
Yes.
Yeah. That's a vampire game.
Yeah. Damn.
Let's talk a little bit about Astarion, Stacey.
Yes. I will lead because no one else has played it. Baldur's Gate in depth. Astarion is a great vampire. I was going to pick Baldur's Gate. I actually don't think I've done Baldur's Gate for any of them so far. I've always been close. We did parties. I said, and also Baldur's Gate, etc., etc. Yeah. Astarion's just an excellent character. He's not actually my overall favorite, but I think he's really won the fan vote, I guess. Neil Newburn's excellent. He's won a lot of awards for it. The deal for people who haven't played Baldur's Gate in depth, which is probably just you two of everybody in the world listening to this.
I know everything about this game. How could I not?
I know it as much as I know Nosferatu, which is to say everything.
So obviously what I like about Astarion's story, he's a vampire because of the worm in your brain, which is the whole point of Baldur's Gate. He can survive in sunlight, which usually he can't, so he is like a full vampire, even though he's walking around in the day. He was basically recruited by Cazador, one of the leading vampires. They have a name, I can't remember. And a lot of his life has been recruiting people to become vampires. And as he goes through the game, he kind of realizes that it's a really interesting picture of Astarion was obviously abused, literally, because he was, taken and physically harmed, and his back was carved with runes and things. He becomes this vampire, and he becomes subservient to the person who's hurt him. So he then, to keep himself safe, and also because he's a hedonist and it gives him kind of this earthly pleasure, he meets people, usually young men. Astarion, like all the characters, are player sexual, but he's definitely kind of built as if this kind of homosexual dynamic in this part of the story. He recruits young men at bars, he makes them fall in love with them, he then says he can promise them the world, he turns them into vampires, and then they become thralls, basically, to the Cazador, to the head vampire. And a lot of his story, literally, it's about, we have to stop Cazador, we have to find a way to hunt down his mansion and get inside and kill him. But really, it's about, breaking this cycle of abuse. One of the, I think, cool things with your relationship with Astarion is, even though he's probably the most sexualized character in the game in terms of the things he talks about, obviously Lizelle and Gale are more likely to sleep with you early on. Astarion is more flirty, he's more openly physical, his default costume shows his abs, he's very in line with all that erotic stuff about vampires that we were talking about. But actually, most of his story is about how all of his life, either he's been used for sex or he's used people for sex, and it's left him kind of hollow and empty. And it's about, I guess, finding a way to break him out of that cycle, whilst at times, for a lot of people, simultaneously having a physical relationship with him yourself, because that's still possible to do. And this is my big, I think, of all the problems I have with Baldur's Gate, this is the biggest one. It was originally done very sensitively, very tenderly. It made a lot of sense, fit with what the kind of story was trying to do. And I think, because it was Jeff Keighley, he was kind of rushed off stage, but he was making an emotional speech about kind of abuse victims and sexual trauma when Neil Newman won his award for best performance. Mm-hmm. But Astarion's a sexy guy. People like him. They like body pillows. So over the various patches, they've changed the story. So he's a horny vampire man. So it used to be that he was very shy when you actually got close to him. He was very reluctant to actually commit to any kind of sexual acts with you because he was falling for you and you didn't want to fall back into the cycle. But in the latest patches, and it does depend on how you build a story, you can still have that. But it's much easier to make him this like dominant daddy character who's like, yes, kneel before me, and I will suck your
every
blood.
second of
What a
that.
shame.
Yeah,
that is a shame.
I really don't like it. They've fan fictionized their own game, and I know the people who are still playing it and still having these paths probably want that experience. Most people who played it the first time have had their natural experience with Baldur's Gate. I just don't like it. Yeah,
it's like a weirdly not having respect for your own story for some reason.
Yeah, I'm never really sure what to make of it. I think Baldur's Gate, the individual story and even the overall story, which is really hard to balance, I think is tremendous. I think the character writing in the game is brilliant. I think there's a lot of things in games that we don't see as much, some of the character development. And it's really weird that they have listened to the loudest, honestly, most annoying fans out there who are, yes, they are the most dedicated fans, but they're not necessarily the best custodians of the story. Yeah, and I don't think the story needs to change. It's finished. I know games have this, it's never finished nature. But it is finished, you know? Like, this is not
a patch coming out this month.
Yeah. And it's started in early access, but it's had its full launch. It's not a live service game. It's not a game that's supposed to evolve. Adding things like, there's a new subclass or photo mode, that's different. This is changing the text of the story to suit the loudest, most irritating fans, and I don't like it.
Yeah, the fans who are going to do that to that character on their own outside of the game.
Yeah,
anyway.
which I think is fine. I think fan fiction largely is harmless. I wouldn't really police or nanny state. Oh, you can't write this sort of a fan fiction about this guy because he was abused and you're continuing his trauma by doing this because he's not real. Write whatever you want about him. You draw like slutty pictures of him. Do what you want. But I don't think the game itself should have changed.
Yeah. Fair.
Subconsciously, that might be the reason I didn't pick it, but I just really wanted to talk about BloodRayne because I was never ever going to bring BloodRayne up again.
I know,
and I will mention Baldur's Gate a lot.
The rest I have to touch on are games I probably won't bring up again, such as Van Helsing, the movie tie-in.
Yes. Oh my god, Hugh Jackman, right? He was Van Helsing.
Quite good for. I think there's two movie tie-ins I'm especially fond of. One is Van Helsing, and the other is Constantine. I think those actually turned out pretty good.
Oh, is that specifically for Van? I was thinking that was just of all movie games, but you mean vampire games, I understand.
Yeah. Nevin from Devil May Cry 3. George, you like Devil May Cry?
Yeah, I love Devil May Cry.
Cool vampire character, always trying to suck Dante's blood.
Why don't I remember that at all? When I think of Devil May Cry 3, I think of the Jester. I think of Lady. I don't think of the vampire.
She's a vampire, but she's like a fae. I think she's like described as like one of the fae or something.
Okay.
Another pseudo vampire is Vamp from Metal Gear Solid 2. Had just a weird dude who has all the qualities of a vampire for Kojima reasons, so takes on the identity of a vampire, and is called Vamp. Not because he's a vampire, but because he's bisexual.
Yeah.
Love that.
Love it. Kojima.
Yeah. Love it. Plague Inc. One of the plagues is the Shadow Plague. Is a vampire plague. Love that. The Rising, a vampire survival game that was really
2021,
popular.
I think. Was that 2022?
I think it started early access in 2022. Really popular briefly, and now I don't hear anyone talk about it.
Nah. Shame.
Hard to talk about without completely spoiling the whole thing, but I gotta at least mention Immortality.
Yeah.
I still haven't played that. I don't hear this.
It plays with a different element of vampirism, and I don't necessarily think it's that much of a spoiler for a game called Immortality.
Well, now it's been said, you might as well. I'm connecting dots already.
It's called Immortality. There are immortal creatures within the game who are going to dictate the narrative behind the curtain, and they are vaguely vampiric.
They specifically say that they are the inspiration for vampires.
Yes. I had forgotten that bit, but yes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Eric.
It's not it's a spoiler for the story. I don't think it is.
Yeah. I actually think I set it up poorly. I actually think this is an unspoilerable game. It is so experiential.
Yes.
So it's really not about the ending or whatever.
I mean, I still haven't played it.
To me, that doesn't have an ending. I was going to have an ending. That's not true, but I don't think the game is the ending.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And then everyone's favorite vampire game, Redfall. The vampire game to end all vampire games.
And it quite literally might have.
Yeah, probably did. Yeah.
R.I.P.
And Resident Evil Village. The first act of that game is a
Dimitrescu, yeah. And the leeches and the cocoons and the inhale the blood.
Vampire mommy and her 3 vampire daughters, which have a very Dracula's Bride thing going on. Brides thing.
I'm starting to think I went too serious with the categorization of vampire because I have just completely forgot so many games have them that I would have mentioned.
You didn't go too serious. No, you picked the DLC spin-off for Infamous 2.
You didn't go too serious, I assure you. Yeah. I quite liked El Paso Elsewhere.
That's what I thought was going to be your pick, to be honest, Eric.
Full of vampires. And then I am not a Legacy of Kain fan just because I really have no exposure to them, but they have to be mentioned because it's up there with Castlevania.
Yeah, briefly mentioned it before.
I think that's everything. Don't Nod's Vampire also didn't love.
That exists, I guess.
Oh, Night Trap.
Is that vampires?
Yeah. So, have you ever heard of that, George? You know Night Trap?
Is it the FMV?
Yeah.
Yeah? I've heard of it. Yeah, I didn't know that was
original
vampires.
Five Nights at Freddy's. Yeah, it's like vampires trying to get into the house and get the slumber party.
Oh yeah. Now you've said that. Yes, I do remember that. The FMV, and it's the sleepover.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I didn't realize that was vampires. I thought they were just robbers.
No.
Either they were a different word beginning with R that we probably can't say.
I don't think that they're named vampires, but they're
loose categorization again. Yeah. My enemy.
All right, very good. Any other ones?
I just briefly want to mention a game I mentioned before and will again, but it's just a cool thing that not a lot of people know is in the game. There's a vampire in Red Dead Redemption 2 in Saint Denis. If you follow, there's various. You see, you overhear people talking about a creature that they've seen. It's very clearly Nosferatu, this bald creature with big ears. And near them, there's some I think it's scratches on the wall, or blood droplets. And if you follow that, it leads to a piece of paper. And then there's 6 or 7 different things you've got to follow. And the game never tells you it's a quest. And then if you follow the last one and it's nighttime, he's just there. It's just this weird, ugly vampire creature they've got to kill. Completely hidden in the game. Didn't find it the first time naturally. Only found it the second time, having looked up 10 quests you must have missed in Red Dead Redemption 2, and they kind of hunted them all out. Really, really cool part of the game. Probably didn't have the best experience of it because I cheated and deliberately found it, but really cool thing to have in the game. Not a vampire game necessarily, but a great game that has a vampire in it.
There must be vampires in The Witcher, and I cannot think of
Blood and Wine.
Yeah, Blood and Wine.
Oh, right, of course.
Which would have been possibly a better DLC option than Infamous.
Whatever. I gotta be me. I gotta choose my things.
Okay, those are our favorite vampire games. Now we want to know your favorite vampire games. There must be so many more that we haven't touched on, so leave us a comment down below. That's going to be it for this episode of Your Favorite Game. Thanks so much for watching and listening. We'll be back next week with another episode. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell, and visit us at thegamer.com. That's The Gamer. No spaces.